Hello guys, today we're going to be covering mech or manual engine control and why it can be beneficial for you to use it in game. As a disclaimer, this won't cover how real engines work or exactly what things like propeller pitch mean. I'm only going to explain it in terms of how it's relevant to War Thunder and what it does in game. Now, by no means is it mandatory to use manual engine controls. You can get by just fine without them. You could even be a top player and never touch manual controls. But if you've mastered the basics of the game and you want to improve, these techniques can give you a small advantage in game. It's most useful to stop engines from overheating on planes that overheat quite badly, like the early Spitfire models. But there are other tricks that you can pull off too, like using the propeller as an air brake or extending your glide range with a damaged engine. But most of these more advanced tricks are going to come in a second video specifically for that, because they'll take a while to explain. In the background, right now what's playing is a comparison of climbing out in an XP50. On all three of the runs, I aimed for a constant airspeed of 160 miles per hour, and I measured how long it would take me to get to 15,000 feet. On the left, you have manual engine controls using all the settings to keep the engine cold. In the middle, we have only using the throttle to keep the engine cold. And on the right, max throttle completely ignoring engine temperatures on automatic. I should also add on the middle one, when I'm using the throttle, that's on automatic as well. Now, assuming you don't want to set your engine on fire, using manual engine controls is around 10 seconds faster to 15,000 feet over just using throttle controls on auto. This works out at about 4%. It's not huge, but if you want to win, sometimes 4% can make all the difference. So let me show you how these controls actually work in some test flights, and I'll show you how you can use it in the real world. I also want to add as another disclaimer, don't mess about with the propeller pitch on German aircraft. Most German planes, like the Bf-109, don't behave in the same way as every other prop in the game. Just trust me, it's not worth it. The engine will explode. The first thing you're going to need to do is set up your controls. So enter controls, and then at the top you can see the different control schemes. Click full real controls. You won't actually be flying in full real, but for some reason you need to press this for all of the settings to show up. Now on the left you can see there's a manual engine control section, and everything that you need to keybind will have a little red box around it. Bear in mind as well that for propeller pitch, radiator, and oil radiator, you will need to enable relative control. Also, oil and water radiators can go on the same key. It's generally a good idea to have them at the same percentage. In the examples you'll see me, when I open the water radiator, I will also open the oil radiator at the same percentage. And remember, once you're done with your keybinds, to change back to mouse aim. First, we'll take out the Yak 1, which has no automatics on the plane itself. Simply press the keybind for engine controls mode, and you'll see at the bottom you can now control your propeller pitch, oil radiator, and water radiator. You can use your keybinds for these to increase or decrease them. Next, we'll have a look at the Tempest. This is a late war prop, and it has built-in automatic control for some features. So first, we press the engine controls mode keybind as before, and manual engine control pops up at the bottom. But when we try to change the propeller pitch, we get an error. Manual propeller pitch control is unavailable as auto mode is enabled. Generally speaking, just leave it on auto. There's no real reason to change it unless your engine is overheating, which we'll go over later. Now, if you did need to change it, the keybind you will need to press is toggle auto prop pitch. And then you'll see a message below, auto prop pitch off. And it will show the current pitch of the propeller, which you can then change with the keybind like before. And if you try and change anything with the radiators, you'll see the same message pop up, but for the radiator. Simply press toggle auto radiator, and you'll be able to change the radiator settings then, just the same as you can with the propeller. For this next example, we have the B-29, which has 4 engines. These keybinds will only be relevant to you if you're flying a plane that has multiple engines. So I'll just flash these controls up on the screen again, and the ones that you need are highlighted in yellow. So again, we press our keybind for engine controls mode, and everything comes up as before. But now if we press our keybind for first engine controls, it will disable inputs to engine 1. So now if I increase the throttle, decrease the throttle, change the propeller pitch, or change the radiators, anything like that, it will only apply to engines 2, 3, and 4 because I've disabled the controls to engine number 1. Now if I press the keybinds for first engine controls, second, third, and fourth, the first engine will have its inputs enabled again, but the other 3 engines will be disabled. So now if I press toggle engine, you'll see that only the first engine shuts down, as all the other engines have their inputs disabled. I can then go through and disable each engine one at a time, change their pitch, change their radiators, anything like that. All I need to do is toggle engine 1 and then toggle engine 2. The engines that are not receiving inputs will be grayed out in the top left corner. And this is useful if only one engine is damaged, because you can disable controls to the working engines and then only deal with the engine that isn't working. But this will be covered in the advanced video. The most common scenario for needing manual engine controls is to prevent your engine from overheating. I'm going to have some footage rolling in the background now of an early Spitfire. These are notorious for overheating quickly. This also feels like a good place to mention that each map has its own temperature. For example, snowy maps like the snowy Moscow map is cold, and because it's cold, your engine won't overheat as easily. Whereas a desert map will be very hot, so your engine will overheat quite easily. This is also a good place to explain what the colors mean. When your engine temperatures turn yellow, that means you have 5 to 10 minutes of operating the engine at that power before bad things happen. Orange means you have 2 to 5 minutes remaining. Red means less than 2, and if it's flashing red, that means you have less than 1 minute before your engine takes permanent damage. Ignore this and the engine will begin to lose power and eventually it will break completely. So let's use the Yak 3 as an example of how to climb out. We're going to climb out initially in automatic mode while the engine is cold. There's no need to overcomplicate things if you don't need to. But when we notice the engine passing 110 degrees, the water temperature begins to turn yellow. We know this is going to be a problem later if we ignore this. So first we press our engine controls mode keybind, and we see that the Yak 3 has automatic radiators, but not propeller pitch. By default, when you enable manual engine control, everything is set to 50%. So our first priority is to set the propeller pitch back to 100% to maintain engine power. Now we can press our toggle auto radiator keybind and see that the radiators as well are set to 50% by default, and the temperatures are back under control again. Now, having the radiators hanging open does cause drag, which will slow down your plane a bit. So, as we don't need to have them open this far, we can slowly start closing them until they're only open as much as we actually need them to be. Also, remember, as you climb in altitude, the air will get colder, so you won't need to cool your engine as much at higher altitudes as you would at the ground level. There will also be spikes in temperature at certain altitudes. This is because different engines operate more efficiently at different altitudes, and it will depend on what plane and what engine you're using. So let's take a look inside the cockpit. Maybe you speak Russian, but let's pretend you don't if you do. You don't need to be able to read what the dials say for what I'm about to explain. Now press your keybind for toggle supercharger. you'll see one of the dials increase, and at the bottom of the screen you'll see Supercharger Gear 2. To put it in a simple way, the supercharger helps your engine breathe at high altitude in the thin air. Not every plane uses a supercharger to do this, but if they do, you will need to change the gears yourself if the engine is set to manual. So as a quick aside, let's take a look at this 0, which also uses a geared supercharger. So we press the toggle supercharger keybind while in manual, and we see that it does actually have a supercharger that's geared. So we can just jump inside the cockpit and spam the keybind a few times, find the dial that's flicking back and forth, and then we know that this is the dial that we need to pay attention to. When you begin to climb out, check what this dial reads at low altitude, and as you increase in altitude, the dial will go down. When it's lost around 20% of what it reads at low altitude, this is when it's time to change the gear. This isn't a 100% rule, it really does depend on the plane you're flying, but generally speaking, a drop of 10 to 20% means it's time to change the gear. I'll also add, you can just ask ChatGPT to tell you this. What altitude do I change the supercharger gear on? Whatever plane in War Thunder, and it will pop up and tell you. Another way to tell is by just climbing out on automatic engine control, watching the dial, and when it jumps up, you know the gear is changed. So let's put everything we've learned together for a final example. We spawn in, turn on manual engine control, and press toggle supercharger, and we see no supercharger control. This means this plane doesn't use a geared supercharger, and we don't need to worry about all of that gear nonsense at all. You'll see this message on every plane that doesn't use a geared supercharger. So we go back to auto because there's no need to use mech if it's not necessary. We just throttle up and take off. After a little while, we see our engine temperatures beginning to turn yellow. So we enable manual control and we set the pitch to 100% for full power on the engine. Next, we disable the automatic radiators to see if the engine temperature drops. It doesn't, so we open the radiators further to cool down the engine. After a little while, we realize that just opening the radiators isn't going to be enough because the engine is too hot. Now, we lower the propeller pitch down to 90%. And after a few seconds, the temperatures begin to turn white again. This means we can start to close the radiators because they're adding additional drag and they're slowing us down. If we don't need them to cool the engine, then we can close them. For the rest of the climb, we'll be adjusting the radiators so that the engine doesn't overheat. Maybe they need to be a little bit closed, maybe a little bit open, the temperatures go yellow, so you open them again, and you just babysit the engine all the way up to high altitude. This is how you achieve optimal climb performance from your engine. And just remember, as I said earlier, if your control mode is set to automatic, your plane will close the radiators and set the engine to its highest available power setting. So if you get into a dogfight, simply hit your toggle engine control mode, change back to automatic, and you'll have the maximum available power instantly available with one button. So this is how I use manual engine controls. There are some things that we left out of this video, such as using the prop as an air brake and how to deal with a damaged engine, or simply giving you the maximum glide distance. This will go through in the part 2, the advanced controls. So I hope you've learned something valuable in this video. If you have, don't forget to leave a like and a subscribe. Maybe with this video we'll even reach 100 subs, maybe. Hopefully. Either way, I appreciate your attention regardless. So thank you for coming, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.